Welcome back to another Swordmaster Publications presentation. I'm Ernie Lawrence. Today we're going to be studying Deuteronomy chapter 13. Chapter 13 is another one of those that's uh, tough for a lot of people to swallow because it deals a lot with the justice of God and the way that the purity of the Israelite nation was maintained, which was by destroying the wickedness within the nation, any kind of corruption, and you can kind of liken it to the idea of a cancer. When a cancer springs up within a body, the way that we deal with it today is we destroy the cancerous cells. We cut them out. We use lasers to destroy them, or we use some kind of a chemical treatment to destroy them. But they have to be completely cleaned out, or the cancer comes back. And I think that's a fair analogy of what is happening here. So as we read through this, keep that in mind. The idea is that God is attempting to, well, I say attempting to. God never fails in an attempt, but what God is doing is He is keeping Israel pure and keeping them functioning as a nation, as that vehicle to fulfill that promise to Abraham. And so the things that are done here are necessary, they're proper. God is the creator of all things, and so he has every right to command the things that he commands in order to keep Israel pure, as harsh as it may sound. And so keep that in mind as we read through. It's a fairly short chapter, so this shouldn't be a fairly long video, but just keep that in mind as we read through here. So, Deuteronomy chapter 13 and verse 1. If there arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder come to pass, whereof he spake unto you, saying, Let us go after other gods, which you have not known, and let us serve them, you shall not hearken unto the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams. For Jehovah your God proves you to know whether you love Jehovah your God with all your heart and with all your soul. You shall walk after Jehovah your God and fear him and keep his commandments and obey his voice, and you shall serve him and cleave unto him. So, the context here is if you have a person who kind of rises up to prominence among the people. And this person is a prophet or a dreamer of dreams. And this goes right back to Balaam. Balaam is a great example of this as somebody who had a reputation for being accurate with his predictions, with his prophecies, with his blessings, his cursings, all of the things that he did. He was a prophet of God. And he had real capacity to do the things that he did. He wasn't just a charlatan, and this was known because of the accuracy of his prophecies. And so here we have a look not at a charlatan or a fake. We're not talking about like the wise men or the sorcerers of Egypt who used trickery like David Copperfield kind of magic to trick people. But we're talking about an actual prophet, an actual person who receives dreams from God, and they have the ability to do signs and wonders. They have the ability to perform miracles, and there's a lot that is just really compacted into this small chapter here. Number one, we see that um, God did not have a time period where uh, new information or where he was uh, directly guiding things where there were no miracles, there were no prophecies, there were no whatever. So from the time that we have um, all through Genesis up until we get out of Babylonian captivity and we're rebuilding the Israelite nation, God is there with people who are able to perform miracles. And we even see this all the way through the first century where we don't have completed revelation yet. And so there is a need for these signs and these wonders. We have a need for these miracles um, because we don't have the revealed mind of God to guide us in its completeness. And so this is something that occurred throughout. It wasn't just a thing that we see with Moses, and then there's just this kind of dry spell of miracles for 1,500 years, and then boom, we come to the New Testament. Suddenly, Jesus is on the scene, and miracles are back. Um, Although that's sometimes maybe that's the way it gets presented to us. We have prophets throughout the Old Testament time period that are able to do these things, and some of these guys turned out to be not so great people. And so I want to highlight a couple of things here. Number one, these true prophets, these true dreamers of dreams, these are people that God has given these abilities to help guide the people. But in doing that, God does not take away their free will. If he enables somebody with a capacity to do these miraculous things, they can still choose to use that power for their own benefit. They can still choose to use that power to gain personal prestige and to lead people astray. And so this isn't something that was particular to the New Testament. This wasn't just something where we talk about, oh, they were fake prophets, they were fake dreamers or whatever. Look at 1 Corinthians 14. Look at Galatians, where Paul had to rebuke Peter. Peter is the most vocal. Paul was the most prolific writer, but Peter was the most vocal of the apostles, especially when you're talking about the 12 who were there working in Jerusalem with the Jews. Peter's the one we hear about a lot of the times. But Peter, uh, you know, apostle that he was and zealous as he was for God, made mistakes. He was under his own free will, his own control, and could choose to do things that were wrong. 1 Corinthians 14, the Paul is writing there telling the people that, are you using your miracles that the Holy Spirit has empowered you to do? Are you using those for the edification of the church or for the aggrandizement of yourself? And he gave them some rules on how to use those miracles in an appropriate way to where they would benefit the church rather than just kind of make yourself look good. And so this isn't new. This is something that we're reading about all the way back at the beginning of the Israelite nation, um, where these people had these powers, that God had granted them these powers, and they abused them, and they used them to do things that were not right. And so, a person who had all of this ability, once they were given these abilities, if they chose for greed or for personal power or for whatever to say, you know what, let's go after these other gods, let's go worship these other gods, um, of these other nations and stuff. We're going to see that here in a minute. Then God says, don't listen to them. Don't listen to this. I'm telling you right now that I only want you to worship me. What does the law say? You shall have no other gods before me. You may not worship idols. You may not worship other gods. I am the one true and living God, and you will only worship me. What does Jesus say when he's tempted in the wilderness in Matthew chapter 4? That you're only supposed to worship Jehovah God and only him serve. And so these people were to realize that was like the foundational rule, the core rule. And if anybody came and said otherwise, even if they could demonstrate all of this power, all of this miraculous ability that was true, real power, and not the fake stuff, that they're still not supposed to listen to that person, because God would never command. God would never command that somebody worship anybody but himself. Okay, so it says that God, verse 3, is proving you. Now, this is actually pretty powerful here, and I'm going to explain why. God has given this person miraculous ability, and he has left them their freedom of will so that they could abuse that power that God has given them to lead people astray. God does not take over the will of the person able to perform miracles. God is not actively testing the people. God does not prop up a prophet who is a false prophet, imbue them with miraculous ability, and then cause the prophet to lead the people astray so that God can test them. That's not what God is saying here at all. Now, the Calvinists will teach that that God is the cause, the direct, immediate cause of all of this. That's exactly what God did, but that's not what's happening at all. God is empowering this person to do good things. He is allowing them to have their free will so that if they do choose to follow after other gods and to lead people astray, then the people will be tested. But it is not an active thing that God is doing here. It is a passive testing, very much the same way that he uh, hardened Pharaoh's heart. Did God reach down and flip a switch inside of Pharaoh so that Pharaoh was like, you know what, never mind. God has made me not want to let you go. And so therefore Pharaoh being punished is ultimately God's fault. Well, that's unjust. That's the very definition of unjust. The only way that God could justly punish us for our actions and our thoughts is if they are our actions and our thoughts. If God is the ultimate cause of these things, in the direct controlling sense, where we have no free choice in the matter, then God is an unjust God. That's just the nature of the meaning of justice. And so God is proving them by allowing this empowered individual to have that free will and to have the potential to lead them astray. And so God allows this and it tests the people, and God does know, hey, these people are choosing not to follow this prophet. And so I'm showing them, because remember, God never actually tests for his own knowledge. God is omniscient; He already knows. But like Abraham, when he was tested of Isaac, sacrificing Isaac, God tested Abraham so that Abraham would know how strong his faith was. God is proving them. That's that word there means like refining metal. He's testing their metal, if you will, um, showing them, proving to them that they love God, that they are worthy of um, being the nation, and proving to them that they are uh, uh, right, that they are good, that they are obedient to Jehovah God, and people need that confirmation from time to time. Why does the New Testament say, "Count it all joy when you're made to suffer"? Because when you come through that suffering, and you are still faithful to God, no matter what happens to you, you have even more confidence that uh, you have put your faith in the right person, that you can weather any storm and remain faithful to God. And on top of that, you now have a struggle that is in your tool set to share with somebody else who is struggling, to help them. And that's how a part of the providence of God works, is your ability to now, having weathered that storm and been proved, been refined by that fire of uh, persecution or of whatever problem you were having to deal with, you now have the ability to deal with that for somebody else, that you can help them through the same or a similar instance. So that's what the proving here is about. It's not God trying to trick people and saying, I'm going to test them to see if they're gonna remain faithful or not. That's not what this is about. This is about God allowing this to happen by this empowered person so that the people will come through and they will gain confidence in their own faithfulness. Okay. So then it said, continuing on about this prophet or whatever, you shall walk after Jehovah your God and fear him, keep his commandments, obey his voice, and you shall serve him and cleave to him, cling to him. That's verse 4. This is the things that they're supposed to do. But then verse 5 says, and that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death. So again, if God is the one that's down there pulling the strings, God is the direct cause of this person trying to lead them astray to do some kind of trick or test, of the people, then God is responsible for this person, and it is unjust for him to essentially throw that tool away because it did exactly what God wanted. But that's not what's happening at all. God has empowered this person that they still have free will, and they have abused that gift that God has given them, and they've used it to draw people away from God for the opposite reason that those gifts were given to them. And so God says, I'm done with them. They're not using the power for the reason I gave it to them. You'll put them to death. You'll excise the cancer. Because he has spoken to turn you away from Jehovah your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you out of the house of bondage, to thrust you out of the way which Jehovah your God commanded you to walk in, so that you shall put the evil away from the midst of you. So again, he reminds them that he brought them out of Egypt, that they were redeemed out of slavery when they were brought out of Egypt. Again, we talk about the crossing of the Red Sea and the water on either side and the water above. They went into the water slaves and they came up redeemed out of bondage. And if people would understand the Old Testament, if they had a strong knowledge of the entirety of the Old Testament, they would see things like this, and baptism would just hit them. It would hit them so hard that okay, I get it. It is at the point of baptism that God redeems us out of our slavery. Romans 6:16 through 18, very clear on that. But here we're seeing the type of that, and God is reminding them that I redeemed you out of bondage, and uh, I have given you a path to walk, and you need to keep walking that path. And anybody that tries to take you off that path, you need to get rid of them, to put the evil away from among you. And the way you did that is by killing them, by executing them. Again, not murder, which they were not allowed to do, but through righteous, just, uh, the legal execution of a person who had violated the law, because that's what this was. Their law had the death penalty for uh, leading people astray and to not worship God. That's how important it is. That's how important it was during this time, because they were that vehicle for bringing Messiah into the world. But God doesn't stop there. He doesn't just stop with this kind of distinct prophet, this person that is connected in no other way. He goes even further and he talks about it in such a way that there is no uncertain terms. If your brother, the son of your mother, or your son or your daughter, or the wife of your bosom, that is the wife of your heart, or your friend, which is as thine own soul. Understand this. These people are the closest. He's naming off the people that would be the closest to you, the family members or the friends that are uh, the person that is near and dear to your heart. If that person entice you secretly, saying, let us go and serve other gods, which you have not known, thou nor thy fathers, namely of the gods of the people which are round about you, nigh unto you, or far off from you, from one end of the earth even to the other end of the earth, you shall not consent unto him, nor hearken unto him, neither shall your eye pity him, neither shall you spare, neither shall you conceal him. Okay? So this person is the one that's near and dear to your heart. We see this today. We see when you are trying to preach the gospel, people will appeal to their family members and their friends. What you're saying is that my grandma, who I love very much, who is now dead, who was a member of X denomination, or was a good lady, but she was an atheist. You're saying that she is now burning in Gehenna for all eternity, or that's what she's going to do. And that's the type of appeal that is made. But this appeal, God has said here, and He said in the New Testament, if you love father or mother, brother or sister, this friend that is which as is as thine own soul, And how powerful is that friendship? But if this person is more important to you than Jehovah God, who created you and gave you everything, then that's unrighteousness. That's not going to get you um, into heaven. You have essentially an idol that you've put before God, and it's not a valid argument to say that you put an individual human being above your creator. And if your heart feels bad about that, if your heart says that I would rather reject God in favor of this individual, then I would remind you, Jeremiah 17:9 says that the heart is deceitful, that your own heart is uh, leading you astray because your number one purpose in this life, the reason that you were created, is to fear God and keep his commandments, is to worship the creator. That is why you are here. And if you reject God, you are rejecting your purpose for existence. It can't be any clearer than that. God says that if such a person, this person that is so close to you, forget the prophet, forget the dreamer, forget the guy that can do miracles and stuff. If your brother or your son or your daughter or your beloved wife or the friend that's as your own soul, that's how close they are, entice you to go serve other gods, pull you away from Jehovah God, don't consent unto them. Don't listen to them. Don't pity them. Don't spare them. Don't hide them. Verse 9 says, but you shall surely kill them. Your hand shall be first upon him to put him to death, and afterwards the hand of all the people. Why does your hand have to be first? Why, if this person is the closest to you, why do you have to be first? Because if you're the first one to identify the person trying to lead you astray, and this person is known to be close to you, known by you and known by everyone else to be close to you, and yours is the first hand on them to excise them, to get rid of the cancer, to remove them, then there's going to be no doubt about you. Everybody's going to know that you are choosing to serve God, to worship God above and beyond anything human, because humans make bad decisions. Humans, when given the freedom to do that, have the capacity to become wholly wicked. God, who is holy and just by his very nature, cannot do that. And so, if your close family member or your close friend is the one that leads you after the gods of these other nations, then you need to be the first one to bring them to justice and to excise them from the nation. And then I want to highlight here this idea of the nations that are round about, the ones that are near, the ones that are far, from one end of the land to the other end of the land. This is not just an idle statement here. We actually see this brought to major highlight in the book of Isaiah, because the book of Isaiah is a book that is about Judah and Jerusalem. You read Isaiah chapter 1, verse 1, Isaiah tells you what the book's about. This is a book about Judah and Jerusalem. Well, then all through the first half of his book, he talks about all these other nations. Well, Isaiah, I thought you said it was about Judah and Jerusalem. Well, that's the point. It is. Isaiah is talking about all of these surrounding nations, these nations that are round about, nigh unto you and far off from you, from one end of the land until the other end of the land. He's talking about all of those because he's actually using them as a metaphor for Judah and Jerusalem, for the things that Judah and Jerusalem had become by being like those other nations. Isaiah is basically saying, you wanted to be like those other nations. You have become those other nations, and this is what is happening to those other nations. This is what is going to happen to you, Judah and Jerusalem, because you became like those other nations. So there's not this separation, and there's not this compartmentalizing of the Bible. We don't read Deuteronomy in exclusion of Isaiah, or we don't read Isaiah without looking at uh, other passages like what we're reading right now. It's a whole work. Genesis to Revelation represents the mind of God revealed to mankind, and his mind is eternal and timeless. There isn't a chronology to the nature of God. He's eternally just outside of and superior to time. And so when we read the Bible, the growth that can happen for a mature Christian is not learning the individual details of the memory verse. Don't get me started on memory verses, but realizing the power of the Bible as a whole, of looking at it as a singular piece, as a singular conversation that God is having with his creation, and seeing how they all link up together. And so here, this reference to these surrounding nations for Israel is not just a one-time, one-off kind of comment that we don't ever look at again. It is a constant, ongoing problem for Israel, just as the world is a constant, ongoing problem for Christians today. We can be like the world. We can look at the world and be drawn away by what the world has to offer, and we can allow that to drag us away from God. We can allow family members and close friends, cousins, you name it. We can look at those people, and we can have fun with those people, and we grew up with these people, and there's just so much there that could appeal to us and draw us away from God as Christians. But when we look at the Old Testament, which is there for our learning, we see examples and we see how God views these things. And, to an extent, thankfully, for the people that are our close friends and families, God does not require us to put them to death anymore. But for us, in terms of their faithfulness, if they are trying to draw us away from God, then there is a process that God asks us to demands that we follow. And that is the idea of the disfellowship in terms of those spiritual matters. Don't listen to them, don't hearken to them. Okay. So it says, you shall not consent him, nor hearken unto him, nor pity him, nor spare, nor conceal him, but surely kill him. Your hand will be the first to put him to death, and afterwards the hand of all the people. And you shall stone him with stones that he die, because he sought to thrust you away from Jehovah your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. Now think about this. This is the death penalty. Why is this just? Think about what this person is attempting to do. This person is attempting to draw you away from God. This person is attempting to separate you from God. Isaiah 59:2 says that sin has separated between you and your God. What does sin do? Sin produces spiritual death. That is the nature of spiritual death. It is separation from God, who is the source of all life. So if you are spiritually dead because of your sin, and this person is tempting you to sin, in essence, this person is trying to kill you spiritually. This person is trying to either, you can look at it in terms of murder, or you can look at it in terms of suicide, because ultimately the responsibility for sin is your own. But that's why the death penalty is valid here and just, is because this person is trying to kill you spiritually. They're trying to draw you away so that your eternity is separated from God. And a lot of people, I don't think, understand that consequence when they look at what uh, what sin really does, and how awful a disease sin is in terms of, like, if we're using a cancer analogy, when we have sin in our lives, if we don't get rid of the sin, our eternity is separation from God. It's spiritual death for all eternity. And that's what this person who's trying to draw you away from Jehovah God is doing. And so, for you to be required under the old law to physically kill them, you're preventing yourself from the much more powerful spiritual death. That's what getting rid of this cancer does. You shall stone him with stones that he die, because he has sought to thrust you away from Jehovah your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. Remember, that's God trying to teach them about sin. They were enslaved to Egypt the way that men spiritually are enslaved to sin. It's a direct correlation that God is trying to draw here for them. Every time God says, I brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage, read that as, I'm trying to save you from your sin, because I'm, through you, going to bring Messiah into the world, and he is going to save mankind from his sins. Because that's where God is going with this. And all Israel shall hear and fear, and shall do no more any such wickedness as this is among you. Now listen, he's going to go even further. If you shall hear say in one of thy cities, which Jehovah your God has given you to dwell there, saying, certain men, the children of Belial, are gone out from among you, and have withdrawn the inhabitants of their city, saying, let us go and serve other gods which you have not known. So now God is saying, somebody has gone in and corrupted an entire city. We're talking Sodom and Gomorrah level. Everybody's corrupted. Um, the whole city is now secretly, or maybe it's kind of got a reputation now of, you can worship um, some false fake god, Belial. Maybe not everybody in there is actively worshiping these fake false gods, but they're tolerating the worship. The city now has a reputation for that. You shall inquire and make search and ask diligently. So there, you don't just go destroy the city, but you research and you investigate. And behold, if it be true and the thing certain that such abomination is wrought among you, if the city is corrupt and the city is tolerating the worship of other gods, verse 15, you shall surely smite the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, destroying it utterly, and all that is therein, the cattle thereof, with the edge of the sword. You shall gather all the spoil of it. In other words, you don't get to keep any of it. It's all corrupted. Remember, God, to teach them about the extent of corruption, even attributes corruption to physical things. That's why they have to do all of the washings, the water separation, and the fire, and all that kind of stuff. You'll gather all the spoils into the midst of the street of that city, and burn with fire the city and all the spoil thereof, every whit, for Jehovah your God, and it shall be a heap forever, it shall not be built again. So you burn the city to the ground, you don't take anything from it, it's corrupted, you burn it all, destroy it all, and nobody ever builds on that site again. No city should ever be rebuilt on the site of one of these cities where false gods were worshipped. And there shall cleave not of the cursed thing to your hand. In other words, don't keep anything, that Jehovah may turn from the fierceness of his anger, and show you mercy, and have compassion upon you, and multiply you as he has sworn unto your fathers. So if they do what he says, they don't try to hold on to any of that corrupt stuff, then God will continue to bless them. He will show mercy, have compassion, and he will bless them. When you hearken to the voice of Jehovah your God, to keep all his commandments which I command you this day, to do that which is right in the eyes of Jehovah your God. So that's a powerful message to hear. It's a powerful thing to have to do during this time period, because this is how necessary it was to excise the evil, the corruption that could happen, to preserve the nation, so that God's promise to Abraham was fulfilled to bring Messiah into the world. And so, even though this chapter is a relatively short chapter, it's a powerful chapter to read, and it's a hard one for a lot of people to read. And it's necessary to dig into this and understand it, and not shy away from it because it has a hard message. And I would see more of this within the churches of Christ, is a digging into the Old Testament, not surveys, not let's try to go through the Old Testament as fast as we can, just to say that we've studied the Old Testament, but really digging down into and trying to understand what the Old Testament has to say, because in that we come to a better understanding of our Creator, and we have a much better foundation for understanding the New Testament that we're under today. The authority of the New Testament that is in power today for all mankind, not just Israel, but for all mankind, is better understood and built on the foundation. A helicopter flying over. Built on the foundation of the Old Testament. And that's why it's so important to understand it. Anyway, thank you again for joining me. I know it's been a while since I've done one of these videos. Been pretty swamped with other things. I'm trying to get back to these. I will try to do a few more here in the next few days, and work towards getting through Deuteronomy. But again, I want to have the time to do them right, and so I would rather have time between them, um, where I don't do them at all, rather than to just try to rush through them and they're not quality. So um, thank you for joining. Please leave comments. Contact me through whatever methods you have, either comments or uh, social media or whatever. Would love to talk about these things with you. But anyway, I'm Arnie Lawrence Jr., and this is another Swordmaster Publications presentation, and we will see you guys next time.